All right, folks, so I'm here at the federal courthouse for day one, officially, of Lil Durk's murder for hire trial. And I'm not going to lie, things got off to an absolutely insane start. It was actually a wild start. No disrespect to the judge, but the judge made just a little bit of an accident. Look, we're only human, but the judge accidentally said something that nearly completely ended the whole proceedings. Like, it was actually crazy. So the judge was kind of introducing everything, reintroducing the charges. The prosecutors had their opportunity to reintroduce to this potential jury what the charges are, what they're going to be facing, everything that's going on with that. And what was really, really crazy is that, during the judge kind of explaining what was going on, he made just a slip of the tongue. It was completely accidental. It wasn't like anything where I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was going to create any bias, but it was a pretty wild moment. And they basically sort of reread the charges, and then they said, all of the defendants, they pled guilty to these charges. And then it was like straight gasps in the courtroom. People were like, what? There were people that were already in the courtroom. They were handing out like leaflets, like free Durk booklets and leaflets, postcards. I even got one right here. I got given like a free Durk postcard. So I guess I might be team free Lil Durk now. Shout out to the people that are in there, doing their thing. But there was this absolutely wild moment where the judge said, they all pled guilty. And then it was like, gasp, I was like, what? And then he was like, not guilty, my bad. And he kept it moving. Now look, he was very professional. I don't think that is anything that you could say was going to taint the jury or going to cause any major problems. It was only human, it was a slip of the tongue. But it was like a raucous start. Like the courtroom gasped. And then when he corrected it, it was like there was sort of like chuckles. People couldn't really believe what was going on, and it was just a crazy start. And like I say, people are in there, they're fighting for Durk's innocence. Look, I'm not gonna lie, there were a few people in there. I didn't get any hate, fortunately, but there were people in there saying how much they hate DJ Academics, saying that he's spreading bad narratives, that they're fighting for justice for Durk. Durk's innocent, and respect to everybody that was there and is giving their opinion across to this. I even actually got an opportunity just now. I hope they don't mind me saying this, but to speak to Big Durk, Durk's father. He said he appreciated some of the positive coverage that I've done. Obviously, I've done some positive, some negative. But as I said to him, I said, look, I really try and cover the positives. I'm not biased. I'm really not trying to be biased. There's bad stuff, there's good stuff. And I said to him, I think he's an inspiration as far as somebody that's, gone through the system, had a life sentence. He's managed to turn things around, got his freedom back, and now he's unfortunately witnessing his son going through the same thing. So utmost respect to Big Durk. Seeing a lot of Durk supporters in the courtroom. I would say the Durk supporters were deep as they've ever been. I've never seen so many Free Durk supporters handing out things. There wasn't a big protest for Free Durk that we heard, but there was real deal support in that courtroom today, and that was just a crazy moment with the judge. So I've got another big update coming for you soon.
All right, so let's get into what Mel said real quick, and then we'll jump back and forth. Just walked out of Durk jury selection day one. It was a quick day. 80 potential jurors. Goal is to pick 16 total, 12 deliberating, 4 alternates. Jurors were given questionnaires to answer and then released for the day. Judge and attorneys will review the questionnaires overnight and have follow-ups questions tomorrow. Goal is for opening statements to start tomorrow. No witnesses until next week. Let's hope that the opening is for Monday, bro, because, God, I don't want to get, Anyways, the public/media were on the first floor. Jurors were on the 10th with the judge/defendants and attorneys. We, public, were only provided audio in our courtroom. We did not have the ability to see the potential jurors. She says the judge is mimicking the questionnaire, go home for the day process after what happened in the Palisades arson case. No one will be immediately struck off the questionnaires, so all 80 do have to return them all, but it will ideally allow the process to go smoother. I don't know what the hell happened in that, but maybe somebody do. Y'all let me know in the comments. I don't feel like looking that up too. Also, awkward moment. When the judge was going over the case, the jurors, he said the defendants have pled guilty. Overflow room looked around confused. I mean, yeah, I would too. Like, what are we doing here if we already pleading guilty? He then corrected himself and said they have pled not guilty. There were a number of fans inside, and someone was giving this out. But Durk doesn't even have doesn't even have dreads anymore, but okay, whatever. When going over the questionnaire, the judge noted there are some questions related to gangs, but he told jurors this is not really a gang case, so you should not draw any inference to that. And later, these are not gang crimes. There will be a small amount of gang evidence, and that will play a small role in the case, which seems to reflect his ruling yesterday. Attorneys will return them all at 8:30 a.m., and jurors will return for voir dire at 10 a.m. One more thing I should note. I arrived late this morning, so I understand there are some reporters that may have went to the 10th floor and seen the jurors and may have the ability to report on potential jury makeup. I can't because I didn't see them. And she says some reporters that may have went to the 10th floor first before being redirected to the first floor. So if somebody did report that, I'd probably take them at face value a little bit because of what Mel said, saying that basically y'all were supposed to be in the public, in the press and all that. We're supposed to be on the first floor. And then what ends up happening is they end up freaking going to the 10th floor. But Trap Lord Ross got some shit to say. And we like Trap Lord Ross over here. That's my guy. And I know some of y'all be mad. I be talking shit to him and all that. But if we cool, we talk shit to each other. Online, offline. That's how that goes. But roll it.
Okay, so I'm here outside the federal courthouse for day one of the Lil Durk murder for hire trial. And what is really interesting is that jury selection has begun. So let me give you the update on exactly what's going on. We've just had jury selection. Basically, jury selection is now ongoing. It was a packed courtroom. They've got 80 potential jurors. It sounds like that's probably like, I don't know if I want to say it's unusual, but it sounded like it was kind of on the more heavy side. What's really, really interesting is that obviously they've got so many jurors, they've got so many options, because there's really so much scope for this to go wrong with the jurors. I'm not going to lie. They said straight up to all of the jurors in the courtroom, look, this is about a murder case related to a very well-known rap superstar, like a star. He is a big name. You might have heard of him, all right? They said that they were going to give the jurors a massive questionnaire to try and find out a whole bunch of different things. Now, unfortunately, the media and the public, they're not going to be privy to what's on that questionnaire, so we don't know who's on the witness list. We don't know what was asked on the questionnaire. But what we do know is that it was very big, it was very comprehensive, and apparently what we did hear is that some of the stuff that they are going to be asked is if the jurors are into rap music, if they're into hip-hop, what their relationship is with hip-hop, what their kind of history is, kind of following this kind of case, this kind of coverage, if they've got any knowledge of the judge, of the lawyers, if there's any backstory that kind of, might make them biased, and they've been given that questionnaire. So I thought it was going to be a longer day today. They ended up ending it after sort of half a day. They've given those instructions to the jury, they've given out those questionnaires, and those jurors are going to come back tomorrow, and then we're basically going to hear from the lawyers. We're going to determine basically whether or not, some of the jurors are going to be excluded. What was really interesting is they said that they're basically, by the end of tomorrow, they need to have turned 80 jurors into 16. Specifically, there's going to be like 12 jurors that are, the main jurors, and there's going to be 4 alternates. And what was really fascinating was that they kind of explained like some of the backstory as far as, what things they're allowed to find out, what they're not. They're not allowed to get their addresses, but they are allowed to find out, what area they stay in from Los Angeles, what their professions are, who they live with. They said, we need to find out if you guys live with a music executive, if you live with somebody in law enforcement, if you're kind of, just anything along the lines that might make you tainted in this context. And I do have a feeling that there's probably going to be a fight. There's a rumor going around that there were only a handful of black jurors in the jury pool. Now, look, I can't confirm or deny that. I didn't see any of the jurors. I know some people had kind of maybe thought that they'd seen jurors in the hallway. I don't think that can be fully confirmed, so I'm not going to jump the gun on that, and I don't have the information on that. But obviously, you probably have seen that there are rumors going around about the races of the jurors. But at the end of the day, all right, the judge has been very fair. The judge is going to make it very clear what's allowed, what's not allowed. And really, I don't think race has been a really big part of this so far, and I doubt it's going to be going forward. But people are saying that there are some black jurors on the table. I'm going to find out how that develops by tomorrow.
I know this is going to sound wild to say, and some people will not get it, but once I give it to you, you understand. Ideally, if you don't get in people who look like you or age range of you, because there's two things that you could do. You could go for the race card, right? All right, if I'm Hispanic, I want to be judged by Hispanics. If I'm black, I want to be judged by blacks. If I'm white, I want to be judged by whites. You can do that. Or you can go younger, who tend to think more progressive because every other group has always been more progressive than the last. It's literally how it goes. So I'm looking at this from a 2-pronged attack. Let me get their ages, and then let me go about it that way. I'm not really tripping, respectfully, on the color as much because you're in California. And I'll explain why California plays the best part in this more than any other state, in my opinion. The only other one I think that could absolutely give it a run for its money would be New York. But stay to the end and I'll explain it.
All right, I'm here outside the federal courthouse. We just had day one of the Lil Durk trial. It's no longer a hearing. It is now a full-blown trial. It is serious. It's the real deal, all right? There's a few interesting things going on outside the courthouse, inside these rooms. But what was really interesting that I heard today was really the judge giving specific instructions on the gang memberships and what's allowed to be said and what's not allowed to be said. Now, what was really fascinating in the kind of the final pre-trial hearing was that the judge has basically ruled, look, he is very adamant when he gave Durk the big W and severed the two different murder charges, the Vicar count, which is the Chicago murder, the Stephon Mack murder, that's allegedly a gang-related murder. A GD rival of Lil Durk's, who was connected to the people that they say, killed Lil Durk's brother D-Fang. They're basically saying that, okay, that is a gang-related murder, that's separate, all right, we're going to try and put that on the calendar, but this murder, this Los Angeles murder, it wasn't a gang murder. They're saying the act itself wasn't an act of gang violence. What it was that they were basically, trying to get revenge for what happened to King Von. Obviously, the judge made it very, very clear that what is going to be allowed to be discussed is King Von's gang membership, the gang membership between the defendants and co-defendants and co-conspirators, that basically means that they are relevant to each other, like how they know each other from way back being in gangs, the reason and the motivation and the motive for allegedly wanting to King Von because he was such a prominent member of the Black Disciples. But what they're not allowed to do and what they're not allowed to look into and talk about is, the gang reasons. They're not allowed to say that it was a gang-related murder. And what I noticed, and bear in mind, I've looked into this story extensively. I've looked very, very deep into Quando Rondo's gang affiliations, his membership of the Rollin 60 Crips, but in Savannah, Georgia, these gangs kind of have a lot of different, I don't know the right word, but sets kind of all around the country. And, Quando Rondo's gang membership has never been brought up, and they're not going to be allowed to basically talk about gang membership in context of the murder of Savia Robinson, aka Lil Pab. But what is interesting is the judge said, look, it's up to the jury. If the jury decide based on the testimony that they think Durk and them were all in a gang and were doing gang stuff, that's fine. But that might not necessarily mean that they believe that he did the murder, and vice versa. They can say, he said that, look, the jury might be completely unconvinced that Durk was ever in any kind of gang, but if they're convinced that he orchestrated the murder for hire with his co-conspirators, then they can still find him guilty even if they don't believe that there's any sort of gang membership. So it was a really interesting kind of back and forth. Some of the stuff that's going to be allowed, I think, is going to make a big difference, but I think that is a big key issue that the judge has ruled on, the gang membership, whether they're allowed to talk about that. And again, I feel like that's honestly something that really works in Durk's favor. They're going to allow some of it. Obviously, the government's gang expert is allowed to testify, but he's not allowed to talk about certain things, and I really think that is leaning more towards being beneficial to Durk. So I will be giving you guys an update as soon as I hear more. Thank you for watching this one. I'm out.
So let's knock this out real quick. The reason why I say you want California, because that's the birth of gangster rap. Gangster rap has been around since the 80s. You got Ice-T, you got Ice Cube, you got Snoop Dogg, you got Warren G, you got Nobody Does It Better. Yeah. You got cocaine as well. I meant to say Nate Dogg, but I just skipped it. Yeah, Eazy-E, NWA. You have all of these factions, factors, Tupac, goddamn Dr. Dre, even as of late. You had the Nipsey Hussles, the YGs, all of these individuals. And then, you get to your 50 Cents and all that, but 50 Cent was heavily played in the freaking West like he was in the East. So there's that. But to it. Hopefully we don't have opening statements tomorrow, and I'll let you guys judge me on this one. You want to craft this shit as best you can, as precise as you can, with as much time as you can, aka the weekend. If they automatically go off the rip with the opening statements tomorrow, and the jury has to sit on that, I don't like that look. I'm going to be honest, because in my mind, I'm going to believe the jurors, realistically, they are going to be hearing more than negative, and they're going to dwell into that. Me personally, would think it's better if we get the witnesses and all this stuff and everything done immediately after we get the opening statements. So that way I can poke and pry straight through everything and fine tune it up. Now, if I'm a counter person, if I'm an anti-Seti Nash theorist, that's what I'm going to just call people. I'm going to say, man, Nash, shut up, bro. You said everything that the lawyers said, but you forget the lawyers actually said, we've been ready to go since last year. And to that, I would say, you're absolutely right, but you're wrong. because once new information is introduced, your mind is allowed to change. There are some of you who believe that if things change, that you can't change your mind for whatever reason. I don't know why you people believe that bullshit. I truly don't get it, but hey, with new information, you're allowed to form new opinions over here. So, I would normally say some shit like that, but in this instance, hell no. Now, the trial is expected to last 3 weeks. I've never seen it get to a point with certain people where this shit, as far as the defense goes, where it really takes a long ass time. They really like to do theirs in and out, quick and out, quick and out, quick and out, quick and out. And then there's that. What I'm more so curious about is the ending, is the closing statements, because we're going to hear how people have deals already in place. We're hearing that we're hearing that people literally are allowed to just come in there, say whatever, and they just gonna walk home right after that. They're getting immunity. I don't know about that. I ain't seen nothing about that. But if it was, I think that's bad on the freaking prosecution's part. Because if I'm walking in there with a get out of jail free card, I'm looking across that goddamn podium and they ask me, do you know this person? Yep. Do you know that person? Yep. Do you know all these individuals? Yep. When were you offered your immunity? Yeah. The cross on the witnesses are bad. These aren't people who have nothing. Like, these ain't people who just regular individuals. These are people who are all in trouble. These ain't like, oh man, this the homie right here, and he converted his life and all this shit and everything. No, all these fools had something to gain. And it went from a murder for hire to now a full-blown gang trial. They just not saying that last part out loud. I'm just going to leave this right here because I keep getting asked this question a shit ton of times. Nash, man, bruh, do you think Lil Durk is coming home? And I'm saying yes. The fight that they tried to fight, they've lost it already, and this is the ultimate shit that's going to happen. It's the Vicar trial that you should be worried about. I think Lil Durk skates through this all right. I don't think he gets convicted. Worst case scenario, he gets convicted of stalking. But once again, they're not showing the ends and this and ends and this. People talking shit. That's not a crime. And none of those text messages are you guys hearing an actual mother flipping crime. We have audio of Quando Rondo's crew antagonizing Lil Durk's and them crew about what happened to King Von. So why are we going to believe all of a sudden we want peace? Come on. Y'all got music videos throwing up gang signs and guns and all this shit too. Now, I'm going to say this and I'm going to keep on saying this, bro. Quando Rondo and his team wasn't wrong. I know some of y'all think Seti Nash is so pro Lil Durk and all this bullshit, but let me say this emphatically clear. King Von and his actions, that's the shit you got to look at, because King Von would be on point if he did this shit in Chicago. Nigga, you know you ain't finna walk up and boop out nobody and there ain't gonna be no damn bullets flying up. No, that's not gonna happen. You had a lapse in judgment. You thought that man was by himself and they got it cracking. But Lil Tim ain't wrong. Quando Rondo ain't wrong. Technically, King Von ain't wrong. But the worst part about this shit is if Durk is found guilty, according to the streets, he ain't wrong. And that's the most fucked up, diabolical part about this shit. And if you go back to one of my the video that blew up the most on this channel was me calling and predicting this shit years ago, before Lil Pop got killed. It don't take rocket science to figure this shit out. You don't need dozer vowels and delta V's. That's rocket science for some of y'all. It's unfortunate because this street shit is a vicious, poisonous cycle that in all actuality, Lil Durk should have never been saying shit. But nothing that y'all are showing me is anything that was illegal. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing that Lil Durk's messages. Tell me the one thing. Somebody help me understand what part was illegal. The trap house shit? Okay. So, trap house, by whose definition, by whose standard? How we know that just wasn't a drug house, wasn't just a kicking spot? How we know that they didn't use their money to get high? We seen Lil Durk say, I went to rehab. So now they're allowed to paint the picture how they want to paint it. I'm just not going for it. And if I seen bias, then call me out on my bias every single time. But at least try to understand my bias when y'all try to say this shit. The feds got who they need to get. Lil Durk is the icing on the cake. If you believe that Durk is guilty, can I ask you, where's the money at? Where's the rewards? If they prove that these cats been using his credit cards and all of this shit and everything, then what? We call this shit tax write-off once y'all get y'all chili up. The feds just called it a crime. But when these other people do it, it's not a crime. These people, the same way they trying to shift black people to be in the face of PDF filing, even though that Epstein shit is filled with white men, be very careful how they try to play y'all, because they ain't gonna play me. Subscribe, turn that bell to notify, share to keep your people aware. I'm debating if we gonna pop up. We definitely ain't popping up tomorrow. But who knows? We'll see how this shit goes.